let's get started with your wrestling career. We'll talk through aspects of that. I mean, what was it about wrestling that really hooked you, and how did you get involved in the sport?
Two good questions. What hooked me, I guess, was just how playful it felt to partake in it. Um, I started at 6 years old. The story that I share a lot is that there were flyers going around, and I grabbed one, and this boy in my class named Raymond ripped it out of my hands and said, Jenna, you can't do that. You're a girl. And so I ripped the flyer back and said, "Oh yeah, well watch me." And I raced off the bus that day and begged my mom to let me, join. And she was like, "Jen," like she kind of blew it off. She was, "Jen, you're gonna be the only girl." And I said, "Yeah, what's your point?" And she was like, "Oh gosh, I guess nothing." And so they let me go down into that basement of Rocky Point wrestling room, where you just don't know what time of day it is because it's so dark in there.
Yeah.
And I just fell in love with it. I really loved it's a great room in Rocky Point. Coach Darren Goldstein, who was there from the beginning of my career, and coach, there's a bunch of other coaches. I can't think of their names right now, when I was six, but they were just a community environment, and they didn't make me feel any different for joining. And they made wrestling fun. It wasn't I didn't feel like I was going down the basement to get tormented. And I think there was just a knack that I kind of liked beating people up a little bit, and this was a way to do it with rules. So I was
Yeah.
hooked.
Well, and most of the people you're beating up at that point in your career were boys, right? I mean,
Right. Yeah, all boys.
yeah, no, but I mean, you stuck with it, right? And even as you changed and the boys changed, you were still out there competing and getting better. And when did you realize that you were pretty good at this thing, that you might have a future in wrestling, that it wasn't just something you did for fun?
Man, that's a good one. When I look back and watch my old film, I kind of laugh and think, how the heck did I make it this far? Because I truly started at such a beginner. But I think my mom, just her personality was to instill like an insane amount of ungodly amounts of confidence at a young age. And so I didn't even know wrestling wasn't in the Olympics when I had started. And I thought for sure once I did it that I could make it to the Olympics. I thought I could make it to the Olympics in multiple sports. So I think I just had confidence at a young age. And then I think by the time I won Fargo, I think I thought my first time when I won in 2009, I think I, wrestled a senior in high school and I was a sophomore, and I had already been at Northern Michigan for about a year. And that's when I really kind of like, whoa, I'm pretty good at this. I think I threw her back and pinned her, and I finally realized like, oh wow, I'm getting a lot better. It took some time though, because being at Northern, I was a room of, Veronica Carlson, Helen, Adeline. So a very stacked room. And, I was getting beat up every day. So it took a year for me, I think, to score a takedown in that highly competitive room. And so I think after a year there, and then I won Fargo, I started to think like I could really make something of this.
Now that move, this decision to go to Northern Michigan, leave your family as a kid. I mean, you were a young high school girl going off to a college setting to take. You went to high school there, but you wrestled at an elite level already. How did that decision change uh, your life, both on and off the mat?
It changed everything for me. I mean, I truly don't think I would be where I'm at today if I wasn't coached under Shannon Gillespie and Tony Deanda there at Northern Michigan. It's the reason I am who I am. Even off the mat, being in Marquette, Michigan, the people that I met, um, it's just a different vibe up there, and I felt like I was from my peers and classmates and things like that I was really seen for the first time. And whereas New York, there's so many kids in your school and you just kind of get like hustled and bustled everywhere. Going to Northern at that young of an age was the most difficult. I was actually reading letters just recently. I was going through boxes in my parents' house and I found letters that I wrote my parents when I was there because I was
Oh
just
wow.
15. And I'm like begging, I want to come home. I'm telling my mom and dad that I'm only going to make it till January, and then I'm going to come home. And I can't do this. I think I cried at the guidance counselor office every day. um, truthfully. And I think I just like having that really determined personality to like, even though I was so miserable, I just couldn't quit. Like I just could refuse to allow myself to be a quitter. And then every day it got a little bit better. I made a little bit more friends in school. I was finding my footing on the wrestling mat because obviously I was coming from wrestling folk style and then wrestling freestyle with literally the best in the world. So I think it was just finding my footing a little bit. And Shannon, like my mom, is a super motivator every day, like filling my head up with things that I couldn't even believe in at the time. And I think I did it at first just to kind of go through the motions, of like, okay, coach, I'll do what you say. And then lo and behold, I started to believe it. And so I think once I found my footing and realized that I was getting to see my parents a lot more because they would come to tournaments, I'd go home for holidays, and yeah, here we are because of that decision.
So you made the Youth Olympic Games, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's only been a couple of people in our country's history to go to that event. And you were young and got to compete against the best in the world at an Olympic level event. What was that experience like for you, and how did that help you widen your perspective of what you might do in wrestling and what the world was like?
Right. It was a fantastic experience. The Youth Olympic Games is something that is near and dear to my heart forever, because it really opened my eyes to the levels of it. At that time, Youth Olympic Games, it's like the cadet age level, and all the people in all those weight classes, they went on to be world and Olympic medalists. So uh, it was just kind of foreseeing what was going to happen almost. And so they set it up just like the Olympic Games. Everything felt like what I'd seen on TV and things like that. My mom got to go and watch me, and it just, and then I was also there a whole month too. So that's what's really unique about these Youth Olympic Games as opposed to going to Junior World or going to Cadet Worlds is I was there for the whole Youth Olympic experience. And so we did all these culture activities each day, met with different countries, and that's how I became friends with Dory Yates from Canada. She ended up getting a world medal. I can't think of which one now.
Yep.
Maybe I think a gold medal. I can't remember, but that her and I were the only two English speaking countries for wrestling there, and so we just became really good friends. We'd walk all over the whole complex a lot. So it was a very eye opening experience, and it was in Singapore too, which is really really beautiful country, and everyone was so welcoming. So they really did a great job of making us feel special, making us feel like youth Olympic athletes.
Yeah, and you got to wrestle on the beach a little too,
I
right?
did. I always say that my first medal came from the beach wrestling. So it's a little bit harder
That's
than people think.
Yeah, well, it is. It's still hard. You're just doing the mat stuff lately, but
Yeah.
you became excellent in high school. You were athlete of the year, the A6 wrestler of the year, right? But you had a transition in your life after you finished your and got your high school degree. Talk about how that sorted out, what decisions you made, and where it led to you after you finished high school.
Yeah, I was really fortunate to have a lot of young high school success. And I think it put a lot of like pressure on me that I just wasn't maybe at the time accustomed to realizing how to handle that. I went from Northern Michigan, did a year of college there, and then that program, the funding for the women kind of got cut and moved around. And so I had to make a decision to go to, wrestle in some of the colleges that offered women's wrestling, or, Terry offered me a spot at the Olympic Training Center. And, I considered it maybe lightly, but the pace that I was on was just more on that Olympic development route, I thought, than kind of going to a college. And I had been doing that exact system for 4 years already. So I just wasn't really sold on that wrestling for a specific college. And so instead, I came out to Colorado Springs and trained there, and then went to UCCS up the road a little bit. So it was a tough experience because things were different than my experience at Northern Michigan. The training was different, the recovery was different. And I think we've come a long way with our younger athletes now. I think we're understanding how to give them more rest and recovery, and just kind of how to keep young athletes in the sport for longevity. And so that was kind of a little bit of figuring that out. And I made my first world team in 2014, training out at the training center. And then after that, it was kind of like a little dip in my wrestling career. And I felt kind of like all over the place. I didn't really know maybe what I wanted. I felt like I didn't know what I was gonna accomplish in wrestling. It just felt like I was almost behind the curve, I guess. And so I was just kind of navigating that. And when you're training at the training center, you realize quickly, like, hey, if you're not on a national team, you're not making any money. And so I was a person that wanted to take care of myself and set myself up. And so that kind of led to the decision to join the Army and wrestle for that program. And so, yeah, that's kind of where life took me. And I, finished up my career with the Army and that program there. And so, uh,
Well,
it all
and that was
happens for a
quite a
reason.
while. So, I mean, when you first got into the Army, um, talk about the culture there, the kind of support you got, the things that made that program work for you. Because obviously, you were serving our country, but you were also competing as an elite Olympic level athlete. Uh, why was that a good fit?
I think at the time it was a good fit. Not that the training center was not a good fit. I think I just needed to get a little bit more, maybe independence, be a little bit more in charge of my career somewhat. And it was a program that offered you to kind of get paid while wrestling and further your school career and, do all that stuff that you can do in the Army. And so, I made that decision. And what I'll say is that being in the Army is what I think just gave me a lot of confidence. Like when I went off to boot camp and then I went to my advanced individual training, the drill sergeants there just like my mom, just like Shannon, super kind of motivators. The Army is about kind of like turning you down a little bit to lift you up. And I think I just did really good with that fit. I really believed in myself and it made me believe that I could lead others. And that kind of transformative experience, I think, made me a much better athlete, a much better person. You start to realize you're a part of something a lot bigger than yourself. And I think it gives you a lot more confidence, instead of just wrestling because I'm just a wrestler or things like that. I started to realize that, I was a soldier first and I enjoyed being a soldier first. I got a lot of confidence doing that. And so that was just a really like life-changing experience to kind of have really good female leadership too. At my schools that I've went to, I've been so fortunate to have really, really good leadership. And these are NCOs and chief warrant officers that I still talk to today, and they still follow my wrestling career and all the things that I'm doing. So it's just been a really positive experience.
You talked about making a senior world team even while you were at the training center. And I mean, what kind of jump was that from being a great age group athlete to be out there as a senior athlete?
When I was, because I had just turned 21 when I made that team. But the year before I'd watched, Allie Reagan do it. And we were always on the junior teams together. And so I was her training partner in 2013. And then that next year I made the world team. And I always say, I really feel like because I was her training partner in 13, it's why I made the team in 14. There just has to be a switch. There has to be a moment where you're like, I don't want to be a training partner. Like I love Allie, but I don't want to be a training partner. I want it to be my moment. I want to have these opportunities. And again, you watch people from, other countries that you've wrestled, you've beaten, and they're getting medals. And so you kind of see, you're like, hey, I'm not far off. I don't know I got to close this gap a little bit, but that's also credit to the U.S. is so deep in the weight classes, and it can be hard to crack a lineup. So, it was a bit of a jump, but I think when I was 21, I was fiery, and I wanted to beat Kelsey Campbell. She was the one in my way, and I think that, and she was a Olympian, and I had trained with her leading to the 2012 Olympic Games. I'd worked with her and Yelena a lot, and I just knew I could beat her at 21. You kind of just you got to make that decision in your head a little bit where you're like, I'm not losing to these people anymore. And so that was kind of like that jump. And of course, going to Worlds, I lost my first match to Japan, which, that person was kind of expected to make it to the finals. And then she gets upset by the Mongolian. And that's it, right? That's the world championship experience sometimes. And so that just opened my eyes to the depth and a little bit of the flaws in my wrestling and things like that. But it was good. It was great to make a team at 21. And again, like I was there with Allie. Sarah Hildebrandt was a training partner for Allie. And these are my best friends, and we're having such young success. And I think we pushed each other. If you look at our, like my junior world teams, the past, I mean, Olympic champions, Olympic medalists, world medalists. Like
Mhm.
I've been really lucky to be on some really good junior world teams, and that's what I think we all just raise each other's levels.
So, and we talk not just in the interview, but all the time. And I mean, you're always talking family, right? You mentioned your mother when you were still, in high school. You talked to me about a tattoo you got in honor of your brother, and just talk about the family support and what they mean to you throughout your wrestling career, but what also being part of a family that obviously was tight, what that did for you as a person.
Yeah, I've just been really lucky that my family has always talked about like my ancestry a lot. Like my mom and dad were really big on that. I always knew where I came from. I always knew why I am the way I am. I'm real big nurture versus nature type of person, and I've just been lucky to kind of know my roots. And I think knowing your roots makes you a stronger individual. You appreciate people. I appreciated my parents' sacrifices. You know, I was my mom's best friend. And so I got to know like probably a lot of stuff too young, even. I just like knew a lot. And so I was very conscious of like what was going on. And so and taking care of my brother who's autistic. I've been like a caretaker of him since I was a kid. I've always been watching my brother's back. And so that kind of experience just makes you appreciate the journey and appreciate that whether I win or lose, I still have people that love me, and that kind of family dynamic contributed to when I met, my wife, Alex, who, obviously, here she interned for you. But it just like she just knows wrestling and appreciates wrestling, and my family circle just grew a little bit, right? And so I had all these people that were invested in this dream, and instead of it just being all about me, it was like I had these people that my wife would do a weight cut workout with me. She would, if one of us is dieting in the family, we're all dieting in the family. So I think Josh probably doesn't appreciate that, but he definitely participated in it. But yeah, I've just been really lucky to have really amazing people around me, and I wouldn't be in the positions and I wouldn't have these opportunities if it wasn't for all these people and great coaching staffs and things like that. And so wrestling will always end one day, right? I made the decision to hang it up, but wrestling will end. And I think having all these people around me, you're always going to be a wrestler, but you also kind of have to know that you're bigger than wrestling. You're bigger. You're more than just wrestling. You're more than just the school that you went to or the degree on your wall or the whatever. You're bigger than that. And I think kind of having that outlook just made me appreciate every step of the way.
So when you and Alex got together, right, and built a future together, what kind of support did you get with that, or what kind of challenges did you face? Obviously, a wrestling community is growing, and people are doing things that may not be something people were exposed to. How is that getting that life built together, and the people are surrounding you with that?
Yeah, it's been, I think at first I was really like apprehensive, because you don't want to be maybe labeled a certain way or only looked at like that. And so it was maybe hard for me to like quote unquote come out, I guess. Um, but I just did. And like I do in everything in my life, I don't do anything halfway. I just fully embraced everything and I just kind of like knocked that door down. And it's like, this is who I am. This is who I'm with. You either love me or hate me. And fortunately for me, people loved me and people loved Alex probably even more. And so it just, we were really welcomed. I think what I like about social media is that I've always kind of given an inside look, I guess. I don't mind sharing things that make me happy, things that make me sad, my experiences, because I ultimately think that just made me stronger as a wrestler to kind of embrace those vulnerabilities. And so I had so many people that were just happy for Alex and I. And I think my wrestling career and my life and all the things that I've done ever since I've met my wife can showcase what being authentic and how authentic can lead to happiness and all these things makes, life worth living, I guess. And so all these really good things started to kind of unfold and people really embrace that. And so I've been lucky. I've been really blessed that the wrestling community has always looked to Alex and I as a positive role model. And I think when you're doing the right things and walking life the right way, uh, people really don't care who you love, what you do, things like that. So I can appreciate the wrestling world for that. We've had a good experience.
So, I mean, a lot of people are going to have memories of the Olympic trials in 21, right? Your mom passes, and then you have to go out there and battle for an Olympic spot. And obviously, wrestled at a high level. You made the finals and competed against one of the greatest athletes of all time in a memorable series. Looking back, what was that week like for you? Because it was very public, right? I mean, you had a huge loss, but you also had to go out and be who you were, which is a champion wrestler. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was the worst time of my life, right? It was truly the worst time I've ever experienced, and it was just on public display. And I sometimes I can talk about it with not clearing my throat, and sometimes I can't, and that's kind of grief. It just hangs on and reveals itself whenever it wants, and we
Yeah.
can't control that. But yeah, I think it was a lot more than just a week, and I think that's what I carried so deeply. I was with my mom for 42-ish days total in the hospital. 39 of those were her in the ICU. And I was there, and it's COVID time, right? So there can't be more than one person every 24 hours. So it was just me in this room for 12 hours each day, not walking outside that hospital building. And so there was so much that went into the week of Olympic trials. So I think, that week after, I really had no intention of wanting to wrestle. I knew that I wasn't going to be at my best because it was like a month in the hospital. Before that, I had COVID myself, so I just knew I wasn't training. I wasn't mentally ready, and I just ultimately wasn't. I don't. It was hard for me to want to put my you know feet on the mat when I didn't feel like myself. But I ultimately did to honor my mom and to kind of showcase, if my mom could fight in the hospital for 40 days, that I could fight for these next 2 days. And so I didn't decide to go. I actually changed my plane ticket, and so I didn't get to Olympic trials till like the very last second, and got there, and it was a very eerie feeling. It felt very odd to just be like, I felt like I had a lot of eyes on me. And I remember hysterically crying before and going out to my first match. And I remember Spencer Mango, and he's the Greco coach, obviously. And he looked at me and he was like, I was like, Spencer, I can't do this, And he looked at me and he was like, just take a breath. He's like, you can do this. And I think just having like just that kind of like calming nature, and Spencer speaks with such confidence. Spencer just approaches life with such confidence. So I think I was just like, took that breath, and I went out there, and it was like tech fall. The moment that I knew I had to wrestle Allie in that mini tournament finals, I remember just feeling like I could hear my mom so clearly saying like that I was gonna win, like I was gonna beat her, and I just knew. I was like I felt like it was written in the stars. Like I'm gonna beat Allie, I'm gonna go beat Helen, and this is gonna be a lifetime movie. And I think in those moments I thought maybe it would make up for such tragedy. And then, like beating Allie in like that fashion, I remember I felt like the adrenaline was insane. I couldn't even control it. I remember I didn't even have any weight to cut, but I just kept running that night because I was like, I was like, I'm really going to do it. And then, I wrestled Helen, and kind of approaching that, I felt ready. And I felt like that first match, I felt like the referee was way too involved and giving kind of hair pulling points. And so I remember that next match, I was like, I'm not going to leave this in the ref's hand. I'm going to absolutely, I don't care what happens, I'm going to give it 1,000,000%. And I can remember, her and I were going back and forth, takedown, takedown. I got a takedown in a turn. She gets another takedown, and then she's up by one. And I remember thinking the time was winding down, and I really felt like my mom was in my brain that match, and she was like, Jen, you have to go now. You have to go now. And I remember I took the worst shot possible. I was in horrible form. And I remember just hearing my mom in my brain. And instead of trying to like finish it technical, sometimes you just got to do what's in the moment. And I remember I just threw Helen back and, I landed on top, and that was that match too. And so it was kind of in those moments, it was electric, but also still carrying such weight. And then obviously I go, and even though I feel like I'm ready for that third match, my body wasn't. I think all those days of not training and being mentally and physically exhausted just kind of caught up with me. And before I knew it, I was on my back and Helen was getting her hand raised, and it felt like tragedy 2.0 again.
Yeah, well, I mean, it just was a dramatic time to be around wrestling because, like you said, it was very public, but you really went out and you showed your stuff regardless, right? I mean, that's
Absolutely.
something you can be proud of. But something else you can be proud of is that world medal you brought back. That you'd been at a world tournaments at the senior level and even at the age group level, and this was a podium time for you. What was that tournament and that part of your career like, where you cashed it in, right?
Yeah. I mean, well, I look at that medal and I have so much pride, but also I look at it and I have a lot of compassion for who I was in those moments, and I know what it took to get it. And so it feels so unlike any other time if I would have made it to the podium at a world championship. Um, and it was, even to make the team, I had to beat a world champion to even make the team. And so that series with Chikara was another electrifying one. And I've been lucky in just a 6 month span, I had these series with two of the best, right? And so I think after wrestling Helen, wrestling Allie, and wrestling Chikara, I just really believe that this is my time. I'm the absolute best in the world, and I just have to go do it now. And I remember I felt like a lot of people thought I was going to win after I beat Chikara and Helen that year. And then I have that opening round match with Nina Hemmer, and boom, I get tech fauled. And it's like I am like in complete shock. But I think I just wasn't ready. I did like an interview that night before, and I remember thinking like it brought up a lot of emotions with my mom, and I just felt almost like an out of body experience. And I think the best people that can be the most in the moment in wrestling, I think they end up winning these matches. So I think I let myself kind of get taken away from the moment. And before I knew it, I lose to Nina Hemmer, and then I have to wait for her to pull me back in. And she has like nail biter matches with each of these girls. And I
Yeah,
remember thinking like, oh my God, like, I don't know. I just can't, I just was in shock because I felt like this was my time. And luckily, Nina Hemmer pulls off this upset and wins the match against the Indian wrestler. And the first thing she says to me when I'm back in the corner, when she's like cooling down, and she goes, "You have to do it now. You have to do it for your mom." And I've known Nina since we were juniors, and so I was like, "Yeah, I do." And I remember I went to bed and woke up, and I had this sense of calm, and I was just ready to go. I was ready to be me again, and I went out there and wrestled those matches and got that world medal. And it just finally felt like I had attained something through such a miserable year and such a difficult time in my life. And I felt like I finally had something to show for it. I had this medal. Um, and it was so gratifying because I've worked my whole life for that. And I really, it was like a monumentous moment for myself and my family. But, at the time, I don't think I appreciated everything because I was so like, I think I was so hungry for more. I wanted to be a world champion. And now I can look back and really appreciate what it took to get that medal, who I was in those months leading to that, and what a difficult time it was for me. And I look at that medal and it sits in my office, and I'm really proud of all the work that it took to get to that.
So, you made a decision recently to stop competing. I mean, what went into that, and how difficult was that for you? Because I mean, you identify yourself as a wrestler all the way back to being a young person, right? Uh, what was the process to get you to where you said, "I'm not competing"?
Yeah, I mean, kind of a long time coming. I've had like a lot of injuries in my last few years of my career. And so I knew that time was dwindling a little bit. And, you know, a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, I can say this now that I'm retired, but, you know, I had a lot of doctors tell me leading into Olympic trials, I shouldn't wrestle because of my neck injury. I was having a lot of issues up and down my spine. And like my shoulders and knees were torn, but I don't know anyone who competes at Olympic trials whose knees and shoulders aren't torn. But my neck was causing a lot of like numbness down my arms. You know, when I was visiting my mom in the hospital, I had a neck brace on. That's how serious it kind of was. And so you know, all these months kind of accumulated, and I I think when wrestling just stopped becoming, it just wasn't fun because I didn't get to be Jenna anymore. You know, I was like losing function in my arms and I couldn't lift the same weight. And so I felt like I was wrestling with like at 40%. I felt like I kept having to make these adjustments and do all these different things for all these different injuries. And so I knew it was kind of coming to an end. And then I landed on my neck at Stillwater wrestling Chikara, and I had to forfeit the rest of those matches. And I remember being really devastated about that because I had won the first one, was winning the second one. And I just felt like, man, I can't believe this is happening because I really feel like it's my time. I feel like I just now started. I'm just now appreciating the journey and everything's clicking for me. And so when that kind of happened, I was, you know, really heartbroken, and I was dead set on competing again because I just didn't want anyone to see me leaving Stillwater in a stretcher. And I always feel like a lot of my story has been overcoming adversity and rising up and showing up. I use that phrase a lot in 21. And, you know, I wanted to be that person for a lot of people. And I think when I finally decided I had to show up for myself and I couldn't just show up for everybody else, I realized that I was just a shell of myself. And so I competed at World Cup and had a blast, had really good matches with really good people, had a great camp. But I think I knew my body was falling apart. And so I had shoulder surgeries to repair a lot of the injuries I was dealing with there. And then as I came back from that, I had a lot of hiccups. My shoulders were a lot worse than we thought. And I think once I started to realize that I wasn't going to be myself anymore, that it was just time, you know?
Um, so yeah, and you know, with that comes other changes, right? I mean, I guess one of your changes were, you know, the fact that you've taken responsibility for you helping your brother, right? You
Yeah.
just talk about how that obviously was something that occurred after your mom's passing. So, uh, talk about how
Yeah.
that did your life. But I mean, because it's something obviously your commitment to him goes back to the beginning. But I mean, it had to have changed your life too, right?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I've been my brother's biggest fan, I think, my whole life. And so I knew at a young age that I was always going to take care of my brother, because, you know, that's just my best friend. And so, and I wanted to give him a life that my mom and dad gave for him. And I knew that I could continue that. And obviously that came with finding a partner who was on board with that, because it really is a big life adjustment. And I realized that, you know, my mom passed away. That was devastating, of course. And then my dad's health kind of like declined, and it was a little bit hard for him to take care of my brother too. And so Alex and I just agreed that it was in everyone's best interest that Josh come live with us. And it really was. It was like all of a sudden I lost my mom. I'm making sure my dad's good, and then we're taking care of Josh. And it's just like having a kid, you know. You got to make sure you can't leave him at home. You can't, you know, you got to always have things ready to go for Josh. And so I think comparing myself to some of the other, you know, female wrestlers, I realized that, wow, I had a lot more on my brain than it seemed like, well, maybe other people had. And it was just a big life adjustment. And I think, you know, maybe a little bit of hiccups kind of learning like Josh's routine, Josh learning our routine. So we were just kind of adjusting to that. And luckily, like my wife is just the best, and she carries the load when I can't. And so when I was training and doing those things, you know, we really pick each other's like we just have a good balance in our family. And I think that's what's led to, you know, my brother really thriving. My brother's doing amazing, and he just goes about life in such a unique way, and he just enjoys it. And so we've been lucky, and he's taught us a lot. And I don't know how much I've taught him, but he's always opened my eyes. And so that was kind of a big life change for sure.
So another life change is getting out of the military and taking a coaching job, right? I mean,
Yeah,
uh,
I'm
you
doing
know,
everything at once.
yeah, well, thoughts about, ending your military career and then the opportunity for you to be a coach down with the program at Bixby High School in Oklahoma. Yeah, just how you're managing that right now.
Yeah, Alex and I guess, just decided to do every big life change all at once. And so I'm getting out of the army. I've retired from wrestling. We're moving our family to Bixby, Oklahoma. We have a baby on the way. So we are just decided to do everything at once. But I think that's just like in true Burkett fashion, is to just knock the doors down and do everything at once. And so, yeah, it's really bittersweet. I'm sad to leave the military and not be a soldier. I really loved my time as a soldier. It enhanced my wrestling career. It enhanced me as a wife, a daughter. It just made me better. I had a lot of really good soldiers around me. I enjoy leading others. Um, I really just like that part of being a soldier athlete, was getting to mentor others and make
Mhm.
people better on and off the mat. That's always been my goal. If I would say, if I just made you a good wrestler, then I failed you. I want to make people good soldiers, good leaders, good spouses, just all around. And so I can take my unique experiences that I've learned being a staff sergeant in the Army, and I get to bring that to Bixby, Oklahoma. And I'm really excited about that. This is where I feel like I can like light up, and I just have a lot of joy when I think about this life change, because I think it's the right time, and it's the right place. Bixby was a no-brainer for me. The staff is incredible. Ray Blake, Paul Mayfield, Shane Roller. It's just a huge family dynamic there. And it's another program where I feel like they're very invested with these students as more than just wrestlers, and preparing them for life. And I think Oklahoma is doing amazing things right now. And I'm just excited to be a part of that growth of women's wrestling there and give back. And I also get to be a teacher at Bixby High School. And so I'll be filling into some different shoes, and I'm excited to take what I've learned in the military of my life experiences and bring it in the classroom, and bring it in the Bixby gym.
So, I mean, and you've always been competitive and set high goals. I mean, in the next phase of your life, as a coach, your goals might be centered around the people you're teaching, right? And coaching.
Oh
But what
yeah.
kind of goals do you have for you and your family going forward?
That's a good question. Yeah, because it's always, getting into coaching, you're thinking about others, and I think you got to think about yourself too. And so I think Alex and I are just one really excited to grow our family. This has been something that we dreamed about. I know I've dreamed of being a mom for a long time. I always feel like I had the best mom growing up and through adulthood, and so I can't wait to kind of get to share that love and really bring good humans into the world. And so we're just so excited about that. And I think, just getting Josh a good program in Tulsa area for him. And then eventually my dad will move out there probably next summer. And so, our goals are just bringing this healthy baby in the world sometime in November, and really immersing ourselves with the community there. We really liked, as soon as we got there, I already had good feelings about going there, but as soon as we landed there, everyone was just so friendly, and they were really welcoming, and they just had such a great community where I feel like they were just invested in people. And so I had a lot of conversations with Ray Blake before heading out there, and I was sold over it. And so I think we're just really excited to kind of grow our family in this amazing community there.
Well, hey, this has been fun. You and I always enjoy when we get to chat, and we got to talk about a lot of cool things in your life. And of course, USA Wrestling is really proud of you and looking forward to that next step too. So, um,
Appreciate that.
congratulations, and thanks for sharing and allowing me to do this with the timing that we're doing it right. So,
Heck yeah. I always appreciate you, Gary. You always go above and beyond for all wrestlers, but especially the female wrestlers. I can't thank you enough for that.